From growing up on a small island in the Maritimes, Canada, to traveling across North America to speak to audiences both small and large, Corey Poirier is an award-winning keynote speaker, having presented to over 200,000 attendees and having shared the bill with Deepak Chopra, Stephen MR Covey, television personalities, and more. A multiple-time TEDx and MoMonday speaker, he is also the host of the Top Conversations with Passion radio show. Top-rated Conversations with Passion radio show. The founder of the speaking program, he has been featured in one-hour television specials on Eastlink TV and TeleTelevision, and he is a columnist with Entrepreneur Magazine, Progress Magazine, and has over 900 articles in print. He has appeared on Global TV, CTV, CBC TV and Radio, and has been one of the few leaders featured twice on the popular Entrepreneur on Fire show. Corey has interviewed over 4,000 of the world's top leaders in search of traits that set them apart. One of his most recent talks took him to New York City, where he had the extreme pleasure of speaking to at-risk youth at the Brooklyn Navy Yard Boys and Girls Club. And he just released a book as well, which he's going to be sharing about with us today. Corey, you ready to rock it, bro? Awesome. We are already making the magic happen just because you're showing up, man. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here. You got a book launch going on, doing all kinds of amazing stuff. So why don't you fill our audience in a little bit about the journey of how you got to where you are today, and then we'll start diving into the why, creating more success, abundance, and just having an all-around better life.
Awesome stuff. Absolutely. So I guess the first starting point, Chris, and I know we chatted about this before, but I'll share it again because we never know who's listening, right? It could impact somebody new.
Yep.
So in terms of my backstory, as you alluded to, you mentioned the Maritimes in Canada. So I grew up in a small little province in Canada. Roughly 3,000 people, I think, was the quote unquote town at the time. I say that because now we're considered a city with 10,000 people. So that's,
awesome.
I guess, over 20 years. That's a pretty big jump, though.
Yep.
But saying that, and how they did that, by the way, is they amalgamated a whole bunch of smaller areas, so technically didn't grow that much. But anyway, grew up in a small little place and raised by a single mother. And so I was raised in this area of meat and potatoes. You're only as strong as your word. Say yes to everything and figure out how to do it later. And I have to say that actually led to a lot of challenges in my life, which we can dive into if you want later, but that was a big part of my upbringing because it makes it hard to say no if you're raised in a place where you're taught to say yes all the time. And so I grew up in this small place and then decided after about a year of running a small business publication. So I was in this small town. I was about 19. I launched a newspaper, ran it for about a year, and decided that I had to make a decision because I didn't want to be quote unquote typecast as the small town publisher. Whenever I had an opportunity to learn more about the corporate world. Mm-hmm. So I made the decision, closed the doors on the business, moved across the country, started a position with a Fortune 500 company, got into an aggressive sales industry, spent 10 years, I'm going to say the better part of 10 years in that industry. Mm-hmm. And while I was doing that, I was starting to plant the seeds for what I am doing today. But then what happened around 2002 is I started doing some speaking for clients. I shared the story last time about how I failed on a stand-up comedy stage, and that led to me getting into speaking. So I did comedy on the side. It opened up the door to speaking. I started speaking, and slowly but surely, I went from part-time speaker, full-time salesperson to, sales. We're always in sales, but leaving that sales career and going into full-time speaker. Then I relaunched a similar publication to the one I mentioned that I had earlier because I always felt I hadn't closed the doors properly. Mm-hmm. I ran that as a monthly publication for 5 years. It transitioned into the radio show you mentioned. That's 5 years old now. And so that's the quickest probably ever version, Chris, that I could give you of my backstory, bringing us up to speed and skipping over obviously a lot of those younger years from saying growing up in a small town to moving across the country. So that's me in a big nutshell, if that works.
Beautiful. It's perfect, man. Perfectly articulated. And for everyone who wants to go hear Corey's old episode, I'll make sure I have a link in the comments in the show notes after this one is produced, after the podcast is produced. So, Corey, dude, let's start diving into what you've been working on recently, man. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'll add too, Chris, is for the person that wants to go listen to the other one, I actually purposely left out my stand-up comedy story, which I know we went into full detail, which was, I think, was about 5 minutes last time. I left it out because I knew we covered it before and didn't want the same person to hear it over and over. So if you want to hear how I got into stand-up and how I epically bombed, go check out the previous one that Chris just mentioned.
Definitely.
So what have I been up to today? I mean, there's a few different things, but you alluded to the new book. That is, I always have lots of balls in the air, but that's the one that I've been focused on and watching the most. So I have the speaking program, which you know about, which we continuously take people into and teach them what it's taken me years to learn in the speaking trenches. That's always on the go. We have the show, as you mentioned, but the newest thing is the book, and I'm super stoked about it. It's been a long time in the making. It's really the grand sum of those 4,000 interviews that you mentioned. It 400 almost thought leader quotes in the book. If you and I had connected before that, you'd be in the book, so you'll be in the next one. I would guesstimate. And so when I say that, that's the bonus section. We have insights and quotes that I believe firmly each one of those can change a life. And trying to prove that, I've been doing Facebook Lives, taking people on who revealed quote, asking them about their quote, and then we spend a half hour diving in. I'm just doing this week. And we haven't run out of, we actually ran out of time before we ran out of content, just talking about one quote out of the 400 in the book. And then there's the meat of the book, which is the first 3 sections, which is basically, it teaches you how to find your why you should bother, what are the benefits of it, why now is the right time to do it. It teaches you the timeless secrets that I've learned after all those interviews. And then it teaches you about the importance of running a meaningful, enlightened business. That's really the core of the book. The book is called The Book of Why and How. And of course, the why is that figuring out your purpose, and the how is the rest of it. So there's a summary of the book. And so I've been keeping really busy with that. We're in launch mode right now. It's been, so far it's been going amazing. I can't say enough about the people that have been so kind to help the process along. And yeah, it's just been a great journey so far. And I'm super excited to get the book in people's hands and see if we can change a life every now and then.
Beautiful, beautiful, man. So why don't you share a little bit more about what maybe some of the challenges have been in getting this book to be a reality? Because I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who have big dreams and aspirations, want to write their own book, want to get on stages, and sometimes life happens and we let it happen and continue to happen over and over and over again for the next 20 years. But we don't want to do that.
Absolutely, Chris. And I will say, putting a book together is no easy task. There's a reason why a lot of people have a great book in them, but the struggle is actually getting it out of them, and not only getting it out of them, getting it in the hands of other people. This isn't my first, as you know, first rodeo, as they say, or my first run down the path of launching a book. And what I can tell you is it's a unique business, the book business, and it's obviously evolved heavily in the last 3 or 4 years. Like meaning, a time whenever you only had the option of walking into a bookstore, to a time where now few people want to walk into a bookstore and would rather just get it, whether it's a digital copy now or at the very least want an exclusive copy and they don't want to leave their house to get it. So it's changed dramatically. So the challenges for me now are, I'll say it this way, I love writing. So there's 2 aspects to the challenges. One is getting the time to write. I guess I've been lucky. Once you release a book, this is one of the benefits. So somebody listening saying, I want to release my book, but it's just taken so long, and the next one is going to take 20 years as well. The good news is, what I found is once you release the first one, the next ones come easier. Oh, yeah. And so for me now, the challenge isn't as much getting the words on paper. It isn't as much getting the book completed. It isn't as much finally saying I'm done, even if you've had it edited 5 times and you still feel there's something you're missing. Perfectionists beware. It's hard to put a book out if you're a perfectionist. But saying all that, the challenge for me now is finding the time to get the words to paper, because I love writing, but I'm very busy. And so that's one challenge. The second challenge, which is probably the bigger one, is really knowing what's going to move the needle with a book, because it's changed so dramatically. Like if I go back to my very first book I ever released, that book I launched with, I profiled thought leaders and shared the book. Was like 100 thought leaders profiled in a book. And so that helped, because then you have those people who want to buy the book for themselves and for gifts and stuff like that. But where it was mostly sold, or how I approached it, was traditional bookstore. And the bookstores, and that's a whole nother beast. I can talk about it if you want, but getting it in bookstores and then dealing with the bookstores is not as fun as people might think. So that part was a challenge, but that's what it looked like just my first book I released was 7 years ago. So in 7 years, it's gone from that to what we see today, which is that more people than ever have books out. I think the number is like 2 million self-published books are released a year now.
Wow.
So your new challenge is, how do I stand out in a book that we may be able to say is probably overcrowded?
Yeah.
And you know, at a time whenever before you could write the most amazing book, and that on its own would do the work, and now that's no longer the case. We have a guest. I'm looking at his book right now, James Redfield, Celestine Prophecy. That book sold 20 million copies to a publisher, Warner Books. Sold 100,000 copies as a self-published book. And we've had James on the show multiple times. We've done a lot of work with James. And what I can tell you is what he did to release the book today may not work the same way. So what he did, shares it often, is he walked around or drove around to 2,000 bookstores, him and his wife, and they gave out copies to whoever was standing in the bookstore at the time. And what happened as a result of that is those bookstore employees all of a sudden read the book and then said, when people walk in the door, you got to buy this book. So it's brilliant.
Wow.
But how do you do that at a time when there's much less bookstore traffic and a lot less bookstores?
Yeah.
So this is a long tangent to say the book business has changed dramatically. So you asked, what are the challenges? For me, the challenges now is, what's the most effective way to get in front of an audience that still wants to get a book and also do it in a way that stands out among all the other books that are coming out? How can you get the word out effectively to people? And then how can you get the time to write the book? What I will say, because you asked a question there, Chris, for other people, which is the people that are struggling still to get the book out of them or on the page, I would say there's various different options. But I'll say this: if you love writing, and getting the book out and forcing yourself to do it is awesome. But there's some of those people that want their story told, but don't really want to write a book, meaning they don't writing process. If you don't like the writing process, in my opinion, don't do the writing yourself. So lots of options. You can hire freelancers. You can go to things like Upwork and get people to typeset the book for you. You can record it into a dictation device and get a person to take that and write it for you. I know people that I'm connected with now. What they'll do is they'll actually interview you. They'll take care of everything. I mean, you pay them, of course, but they'll interview you and take your interview and turn it into the book. So the truth is that if you know you'll never pull the trigger and if you don't like writing, my answer is go to somebody else who's willing to write it. It's still your work. It's still, if you've done the work of doing the interview or recording it into your iPhone or whatever that might be and sending it off, it's still you. It's just somebody else is compiling it. If you love writing, then what I would say is you have to make it a discipline and you have to make it a priority. And, that could mean doing it before you, like getting up an hour earlier every day. But you have to make it a priority and make it a habit, which could take you days of doing it, maybe 30 to 60 days of doing it every day, even if you're only writing a page a day, and eventually it'll happen. So I covered a lot of realm there, Chris, because it's a kind of a wide open question, but I hope I covered it in the way you're hoping. In other words, if you're wanting to get it out yourself and do the work yourself, if your challenge is marketing, if your challenge is finding the time, or if your challenge is actually getting your button gear and actually getting the book out to people. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the biggest challenge that I've seen is people don't know how to get the word out. They get the product done. It's like, okay, I finally got my book done. And then they have this dream and vision of how it's going to unfold, how everyone's going to come running to hear about their book, right? Like you said, it's in the past, you just created a great book and that was basically all that you needed. You just put it in the hands of the right person, then boom, the floodgates open. Nowadays, there's so much competition that you really have to have specific ways of getting it in the hands of the right people and having them share about it as well. I know I've seen Bree Seeley, who was just on, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or last week, 2 weeks ago. She said that she got this big launch team, and I was a part of it, and she got a bunch of people to write reviews beforehand so it could get to Amazon bestseller, and like there was a whole launch team, launch strategy around it. So I think just being more strategic about the grassroots is something that is absolutely required these days to make it succeed, for people who are just starting, at least.
Yeah, interestingly, Chris, you're seeing the first phase of it, which is kind of for my book, which is, again, another approach for me. So I started out with a Kickstarter campaign. That's a first for me. It's also the road less traveled. In fact, I only know 2 other people. I mean, I know there's lots of books that's been launched with Kickstarter and GoFundMe and stuff, but I only know of 2 other ones that I follow. So in other words, that reached me. So I said, this is something not everybody's doing. I need to know how it works. I need to know if it does work. So that's what I chose to do. But interesting, something you just said is that's only phase 1 of my launch. So phase 2, and you're getting the inside scoop here because I haven't really revealed this to anybody yet. Phase 2 is in the new year. We're going to then we're going for Amazon. So then we're going to go for Kindle, Amazon, We're going to go for the bestsellers list, all that kind of stuff. I know there's a whole system for getting a bestseller. There's also a system for getting a bestseller that stays in the charts, or at least stays as a consistent selling book, and that's a different thing altogether. It's one thing to get booked up to the top of the list that says there for 2 days, but there's ways to sustain that. So that's phase 2, and that's a whole separate phase for me. There will be a phase down the line. I have a sponsor that's going to come on where eventually we'll do the, get the book for the price of shipping. And that's a whole business that a lot of people don't know exists. But the reasoning is because the people that are doing that, which, nobody sort of reveals this, but it's because there's a back end. There's a way that if a certain percentage of the people that love that book are probably going to want to know, how can I dive in and learn from this person more? So eventually I'll take that phase. I'll say it won't be for a while yet. And then we have a system set up to approach libraries and treatment centers and so on and so forth. So this is just one part of a much bigger launch.
Wow.
But the street team thing, I didn't really approach it this way as much as I will. But the good thing is when you have as many people as I do profiled in the book, you kind of got a built-in street team whenever you're ready to see if they want to jump in and help promote the same book they're in.
Wow.
So I get that. That's like, I'm talking now about the stuff that hasn't even happened. So some of this stuff will probably change slightly as it hits. But I've done it before. What you're talking about having a street team. I launched the book as a co-author called Share Your Message. And there were 27 of us, and we had a whole launch. We had a team that we basically had a launch set up on a certain day where we were all going to be around, and we let everybody know beforehand and got the reviews ready and all that kind of stuff. And that is quite effective. And as you know, Chris, being able to list yourself as a best-selling author is massive. What I will say is now, because the Amazon system is working for a lot of people, I've now talked about the fact that I have a book bestseller. I have a bestseller book list, because now all of a sudden it starts gaining more credibility. So just know the book list. I mean, I could talk to you about the book business for years. I mean, there's so much I've learned in it, but I guess the end result is that just know that if you have a really good book in you, and if you can find a way to get it out of you, even if you don't sell a massive amount of copies, having a book out is going to help your business and credibility in ways that I can't even describe, and you won't even understand until you have the book out. You'll get media easier. You'll get people that'll want you in their shows easier. You'll be able to get speaking gigs easier. People that'll reach out because they read the book and say, how do I hire you as a coach? Yeah. So having a book, I haven't found a bad scenario out of it yet, or a bad outcome of it yet. So
yeah, I think that everyone's like, I know I should do a book, but what's the priority? How do you determine when's the right time to write a book? Would you say that it's something that can be done? Hey, if you're just writing a page every day while you're doing everything else, just don't make an excuse. If it's important to you, find a way, kind of thing. And there's never a right time to write a book. Is that what your guidance would be?
So interesting question. One of the people in my speaking program just asked me the other day, look, I'm working on my book, and she's just starting in speaking. And she said, should I wait to speak until I have the book written? And the answer is no. The speaking, you can get out and start getting it up to whether she's going to earn a revenue right away, or whether she's getting out and building up her clientele and her audience. You can do that while writing the book. But while writing the book, you can't earn a secondary income unless you're doing something else. The book's not going to earn income while you're writing it. So I said, no, do the speaking first. And I didn't tell her, but as you know and said here, the book stuff can take you a lot longer than you think. So don't hold back on doing the other thing because you're waiting for the book. What I will say, though, is, you got to start, take action. And I think the best time to write a book is yesterday. Next best time is today. The least best time is tomorrow. Yeah. And then, of course, I'll say the second least best time is tomorrow. The worst time of all is never. But the truth is that work on getting it done sooner rather than later, because of the benefits that come with it. Not only that, you might have a book that's in a market that somebody else is working on too. Why not be first in market or get it out before they do, rather than having the same book out as somebody else at the same time, or worse, having it come out after them? What I will add too, Chris, another strategy is if you write blogs. And take your blogs and turn that into a book. You might already have a book if you've been writing blogs for a year. You probably already have a book sitting there somewhere on the quote unquote interwebs. If you're doing what you're doing, Chris, I mean, theoretically, this show, what you're doing is, if you went out to the people that you've interviewed and said, hey, can I transcribe our interview into a section in my book? You could do an interview-based book, and you could have a book out right now based on the marathons that you've done, and you could hire somebody else, say, here's all the stuff, transcribe this into a book for me. Wow. So I think, like I said, the best time to do it is yesterday. There's a book called Conversations About or Conversations on Success. And it's, I think if you read the cover, I probably have it somewhere here. Anyway, it sold 2 million copies. And it's exactly the book I just told you, where basically it's a guy who does interviews. He was a broadcaster, and he literally just transcribed his interviews word for word. It just says, you know, if it was Chris and Corey, it just says Chris, and then it has your question, Corey, and the answer. And that book sold 2 million copies. So, Chris, don't wait. Somebody's already trying to teach you to this when they hear this. So now you have the fire under your butt.
Yes. I love it, man. I love it. Well, dude, this is awesome. I love talking about books. And let's start getting to more of these principles that help people clarify their why, create more success and abundance and meaning in their lives, man. What were some of the biggest takeaways that you got from creating the book and the lessons that you display in there?
So I guess it's sort of a takeaway. It's something I had been talking about, but rewording it and putting it into the book was a cool experience about the importance of finding your why. Whenever I talk about the statistics. And when I say the statistics, as you know, Chris, if you don't like a statistic, somebody else will make one up for you. I mean, so I say statistics a lot, but the truth is I always preface it and add in, I'm not saying this is the most accurate or the 100% accurate, but what I want people to take from the statistic is at least the overall theme, which is accurate. So what I'm getting at here is the why. So the statistic I've heard is that less than 5% of the people in the world today have discovered their why. Now, the part I say I don't know for sure is I don't know if that's 5%. I don't know who did that study. And all studies are done with like 1,000 people, not like millions. So I don't know if those are accurate numbers, but what I do know is there's less people that have found their purpose than there is that haven't. So, less people that found the person than the ones that, there's more people that have found it, basically.
Right.
A much higher number that have found their purpose than the ones that haven't and are walking around basically saying help or walking around with no purpose. So if there's a much greater number, again, which I know there is, a much greater number of people still looking to find their passion and their why, then we need to help those people, because think of all the things we've been able to accomplish in this world. With whether it's 5% or 10% or 15%, we still know it's not higher than 50.
Right.
So less than 50% of the people have found their why, and we've been able to cover basically accomplish the things we have. What would that look like if we just added another 5%? So essentially in the book, first thing that was a big thing for me is to share that with people, this idea that most people haven't discovered it, and you need to find yours. And if you have found yours, then maybe you need to go one step further and help somebody else find theirs. And by the way, if you want to have a loyal, raving fan forever, if you help somebody find their passion, they go to the top of the mountain and scream, you got to deal with Chris, you got to work with Chris, Chris is the guy. Yeah. So what I would say is that's one of the big takeaways from the book, is that a lot of people are still looking, which is sad, but the truth is it's waiting for it to be found. What I also talk about is I believe that it's something that we don't discover, it's something we uncover. So I also believe that it's inside of us. I think, Chris, you've had the passion you have right now your whole life. Whether it didn't come out until you're 20 or whether it came out when you're 5, I believe it's there. I believe that my passion, I discovered it in my mid-20s, but it was there waiting. You could peel, it's just basically I had to peel the layers of the onion, but it was there waiting for me. So another thing, I let people know when they say, oh, I don't have a passion or whatever that, excuse or whatever that looks like to them. The truth is we all have it. It's sitting inside us. It's just a matter of us taking enough of the right steps to uncover. And so in the book, another big thing that was important to me is to give people an exercise for how to quickly, I'm not going to say find it or, uncover it quickly in the sense that, it's not going to be like you're going to read this thing, do the exercise, and that day it's going to pop out. But what I will say is my discovery is in helping people through this exercise, and it's a short exercise, people find it in months rather than maybe going their whole life without ever finding it. And so if you can find your purpose or your why or your passion in 2 or 3 months, and it can actually impact you in a positive way for the rest of your life, isn't it worth a couple of months of work? Yes. So that's another takeaway from the book. So when it comes around the why, it's the idea that we need to find it. More people are still looking for it than have found it. And here's an exercise to help you get on track to find it. And then I go into the, why it's beneficial to find it. What are the benefits of discovering your why? And those are easy to rhyme off. I mean, you're sick less often. I found people discovered their passion. They seem to have more energy. They're not as sick as easy. They want to be surrounded. People want to be around them more often. They rise to the top of companies. People want to follow them more often. They make better leaders. People want to send other people to them because they say, you got to meet this guy. He's just full of energy. And so, again, my discovery is that the benefits of passion and finding your passion far outweigh any kind of work you'd have to put to actually uncover.
Wow. That's beautiful, man. Beautiful. So I hear that finding the why is so critical for a lot of people because many of us are walking around maybe not even conscious of the fact that we aren't tuned in and tapped into our why. And the amount of time that we invest into discovering our why, whether it's reading a book, whether it's journaling, whether it's meditating, is disproportionately smaller than the amount of value that we get from that time invested. Invest a little bit, like in comparison, maybe a couple hours, couple days, couple weeks, couple months, whatever. Your whole life, you get to live in your passion and your why and bliss and creating and tapped into your soul and so self-expressed that it blows people away. And all the benefits that you were talking about that come with that. That's amazing, man.
And the exercise is in the book, and it's easier that the exercise is, I'll say it's simpler than people would think. It doesn't mean it's easy to do it, but it's simple. I mean, like the steps of it, you could do in an hour. Awesome. But then you got to take the actual action on it. But I mean, saying all that, the other thing too is that if people are asking, so if somebody's listening right now or watching right now and saying, I don't know if I found my why. Well, first of all, I'd say then you haven't, because when you found it, you know. But the secondary thing is, if whatever you're doing or whatever you think your why is, which can be a part-time thing, it doesn't ever have to earn you an income. It can be done on the side because people worry they have to quit their job to fall in love with something. But here's what I would say: if the thing that you're doing, if you wouldn't do it for free, it's probably not your why. That's your way. That's your test. Wow. If you don't know if you found your why, then you haven't, in my opinion. And if you say, okay, well, this is what I enjoy doing, but I definitely would never do that for free, then it's probably not your true why.
Oh my gosh! There's that business model in the background. I gotta fit this into a business model to make sure that I make money off of it, because if I don't make money, then I'm screwed. And why would I do this if I don't make money? If that's the thought that's running through people's head, it's not your why.
Yeah, and here's the truth. I mean, then so I started speaking, as I mentioned. I mentioned it was my part-time thing first. I was using my vacation days and my evenings, and I was actually speaking for free a lot of those times. Yeah. It might have been for a testimonial. I wanted a testimonial from a huge client, or my first talk ever, they paid me in gym memberships. So it's and so, but it was the thing I didn't care. I would do it for free. In fact, I was eagerly looking for free talks. So the point is that I did that on the side for free, and then it turned into something. So what I will say is my experience is, for most people, if they love what they're doing and they do it well and they do it long enough, then eventually, and sometimes a lot sooner, sometimes it could turn around in a week, but eventually it'll turn into an income. But again, here's the thing: if it takes longer than you expect to turn it into an income, as long as it's your true passion or why, that won't matter. So that's my belief.
That's beautiful, man. 100% agree. 100%. So what are some common misconceptions around people finding their why or discovering their why or living in that purpose that you saw and you uncovered?
So interestingly enough, I have a show, as you mentioned, called Conversations with Passion. And so the word passion is very interchangeable with why. I would say, so what I say in the book, I say it in the book, but I say it in general. I say passion is what you do and why is why you're doing. So they're definitely separate things, but they're still related. And so I have this show called Conversations with Passion, where all of a sudden, and this is inside information again for your audience, Chris, but we're in this process of changing the show name, which is it's 5 years in. I went to Podcast Movement. I spoke at Podcast Movement this year. And as I was sitting in some of the sessions as well, I started really thinking about, and this relates to what we're going to talk about here, but this word of passion. And I was like, what do I do? Because for the last year, whenever I've been asking people, have you found your passion? Why is passion important? All those kind of things. I've been getting, we'll say, kickback or backlash from that word that I didn't get the first 4 years. And so what it is people are saying, I'm sick of hearing this word passion. I'm so tired of people hearing saying I found their passion. And so because of that, so one person could say, well, that's great, because I started to have a dialogue. I say, listen, I know that people are sick of hearing the word passion. Let's talk about that. So I've actually turned it into a conversation on the show, which somebody would say, well, then why not keep with the title? But the challenge is you got to think marketing. If people are scrolling down iTunes and we're at the top of the charts and they see the word passion and they don't like the word anymore, they're not even going to click the listen.
Wow.
So you have to start thinking about those things. But why I bring this up is because when you mention about your why and some of the challenges, I think some of the challenges is that because some people have gotten tired of the word passion, they're also tying it into the word purpose, they're tying it into the word why. So they're almost like, I'm sick of that dude at the office that says he's so happy all the time, he's so excited about doing what he loves. Then all of a sudden the challenge is somebody saying, I don't want that. So they actually think of it as another negative, when in fact it might be the thing they're looking for. And when I ask people, even the ones that don't like the word, when we dive into your calling, why are you doing what you're doing, your legacy, it's what drives almost every single person. Yeah. So even the people that don't like the word passion are still doing what they're passionate about, and they're still living their why. So the worst thing that can happen is people hear them say, I hate that word, it sucks, whatever, and then think there's a negative with it. So the challenge is making sure people don't have that perception, even when they see the book title, that I'm going to teach them some woo-hoo stuff or flighty stuff, that I'm going to say, fake it till you make it, or think strong and you'll be able to deflect all the obstacles. Do I believe in faking it till you make it? I believe for some people you have to, I don't like the word fake it, but I believe you have to get these affirmations even when you don't want to. You have to start bringing positivity into your life even when you have negativity. You have to start, maybe you have a lot of negative people in your life, and I give an exercise in the book for how to figure that out, and then how to make changes and get the right people in your life. So, maybe part of that's faking it till you make it, until maybe it's you might not be super happy now, but maybe you have to practice strategies that'll get you there, and you may not turn into happy overnight. So yeah, there might be a component of that, but what I want people to know is, for me, it's not woo-woo. It's not about, just put a smile on your face and you'll start smiling. Put a smile on your face week and then you'll turn into the Joker and have a perma smile. That's not what I'm at here. What I'm saying is there's real practical strategies for how you can, if you're not feeling it, if you're struggling, if you're having these challenges, you can turn this around. So the struggle for me in writing a book that relates to this is just demonstrating to people how powerful it is to discover your why you should bother, the fact that it doesn't have to be that hard, and the fact that it will change your life, and it doesn't have to be woo-woo or fake it till you make it, or this scenario where you have to be this person that acts like they're happy when they're really not.
Wow. Dude, it was packed full of goodies and goodness and great things that we can take away right there. And I absolutely agree that fake it till you make it is not, like, there's no truth behind that. There's standing in a place and experiencing yourself, like who you're being is the person who's already completed it. Now it's about taking the action. You have to take the action in integrity with authenticity, not pretending to be something that you're not, but knowing who you're committed to being and showing up as that person now. So I 100% love that. That is gold. And we did have a question. We had Kristen who said, can a person have more than one possible why?
So this is probably, I get some when I do a talk on passion or in relation to the book, when people start asking me about their why, this is one of those common questions, whether it's can I have multiple passions or multiple whys? And so I'm going to give you the two-part answer. One, so is Kristen, is that correct?
Yep, Kristen.
So Kristen, there's a two-part answer in the sense that the answer is absolutely yes, you can. So first of all, I got to clarify that there's no doubt on that in my mind at all. And why do I say that? I have multiple passions. I don't know if I have multiple whys. So this is where the distinction comes in. So I was saying passion is what you do and why is why you do it. So can you have multiple why you do it? Absolutely. There's nothing stopping that from happening. There's no law that says you can't. But what I will say is more often than not, the people I've spent time with and interviewed have one underlying why, but they can have multiple passions that either get them there or just multiple passions in general. So to give you an example from my life, I play guitar and music, and I have CDs out, and I play music in clubs. I've been doing it for a while, but that's a passion. I performed stand-up, as Chris, you remember from the show. I did it for a long time, and that didn't relate to my speaking at all. That's a second passion. I used to, I'm not as often now, but for 20 years, more on than often, I practice yoga almost weekly, go to classes. That was a passion for me. Yoga is not really getting me anywhere near my why. The stand-up and the music kind of are, because my why is about creating a positive ripple in the world. And, obviously with music, somebody comes out to see your show and they get rid of the bad in their day, they forget about it, or same with comedy. you're helping to create a positive ripple. So to answer the question, can you have multiple whys? Yes. I mean, maybe I want to create a positive ripple in the world, and I also want to help put a smile on people's faces, and then I want to, I want to help people get out of a funk they're in. I mean, you could say if a positive ripple probably is all those things, but if you went to more like I want to help people get out of their funk, I want to help coaches earn more money, and you could have multiple passions, and they all could be separate fuels. But I think at the end of the day, for most people, you're going to have one central why. So why are you doing this? Chris, and I'm not going to put you in the spot and ask you your why, but like I said, my why is to create an invisible ripple or an invisible impact in the world. And so how do I do that? It could be, like I say, performing stand-up or music, or more likely it's speaking from a stage, putting a show where I'm introducing people to other thoughts and insights. It could be writing for Forbes or Entrepreneur and getting that article out there that impacts somebody in a positive way. And know that it only takes one person to run with the idea that you shared that could actually change the world, or at least your world. So for me, I have one why, I would say, and then I have multiple passions. So if I distinguish, Christine, between the two, I would say you could have multiple passions, yes. You could have multiple whys, yes. But what I see most often is either a single passion and a single why, or multiple passions and a single why.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's so articulate and well put. There's like that one main driving why, the life why, the soul purpose, so to speak, and then there's the passions. And I believe as we evolve, as we become, bigger, more powerful human beings, up to bigger games, it's so critical to find joy in more spots of life, to find more things to fall in love with or create loving relationships with. And I think to be only focused on one thing and love one thing only and have that be your only why, like maybe Donald Trump, for example, only loves business, but I don't believe that's the case. I believe he loves lots of different things and has a lot of passions. If we're single-minded, I think it leaves out the opportunity to receive a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, a lot of flexibility, and life lessons that we're here to learn. Like if it's just one thing, it's kind of narrow, and there's nothing wrong or right about that. This is my personal experience. If you learn to love things and enjoy the process and fall in love with things, if you're open to having yoga land in your lap and then loving it, and it's like, boom, that's a passion. If you're open to having music or having drawing or having exercise or dancing, I love dancing, right? Like if you're open to having these things land in your lap, then you will have so much more passion, and your why will ultimately be fueled even more to have you accomplish more.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And I'll add a thing to that too, is that because it's interesting what you said there. So if I said like playing music, for instance, or yoga, as you and I both mentioned now, or meditating, or whatever that could be, or just walking the dog in nature, whatever that is. So here's another thing I'll say, another insight from all these interviews. What I've found is there's often times that the passion that earns an income for those that are earning an income from their passion can be single focused and ends up being single focused, but those same people typically have multiple things they love, as you mentioned, or are passionate about, and in a lot of ways they fuel that main one. Yeah. But it's not abnormal for somebody to be in a niche or niche, depending on what word you want to use on it, in a market, let's say, that's very niche. So let's say, for example, they coach coaches. So they don't coach anybody, they just coach coaches. Right. That might be their one passion that drives their income, but they might, like you said, they might teach yoga on the weekends or practice yoga. Right. They might go out all the time in the gym 5 days a week. So they're having multiple passions that keep them excited, keep them actually, in a lot of ways, probably more well-rounded. And as you said, open to things. But I found that if I were going by percentages, a large percentage of them have that one central passion.
Financially, that makes a difference. And
it's usually the niche, like what if they're niche. I mean, and again, that's another whole discussion. But, Tony Robbins, for instance, I would argue is not as niched or niche as, let's say, Gary Vaynerchuk or Seth Godin. Take Seth Godin as a great example, but for the viewers and listeners who know Seth Godin, he's got, I think, 11 or 12 books out now. The Purple Cow is one of them. Tribes is another. He has a very distinct niche and niche. And when you bring him in to talk, I think he probably has, and I don't know this, but he probably has like 2 talks that he delivers, and they're very focused on one thing. Whereas Tony Robbins might come in and talk to you about success or leadership or business mastery, and obviously both of those guys have done okay. Yeah. So I don't think we can say there's a right or wrong. But what I will say is there's a reason probably why they say the riches are in the niches. The truth is, with so many people in the world now, if you can be known for one thing as at least the most that you're known for out of all the things you do, you'll probably have an easier time finding paying raving clients than if you're known for a whole bunch of things. But if you're multi-passionate, that might not be an option anyway. You might just be that person that can't niche it down. And so what I'm here to say is I think both work. I've studied both. I'm on the side of having not enough in the way of niches. I love a lot of things, and I show that in everything I do. But I will say there's definitely a case to be made for why a person could consider being focused on one thing when it comes to earning their income. And then, as Chris and I have been saying, being open as a person to all the other things that you love and bringing them into your life, and not just saying, leave those things out. I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. So I think the takeaway is there's no right or wrong, but know what works for you and go in that direction. Because for me, niching doesn't work. It may at some point. And I'd say for Seth Godin, trying to be all things to everybody would certainly never work for him.
Wow. Love it, man. Love it, love it. Kristen said, I don't know, but you definitely sold me on your book to figure it out. And she said, love this conversation. Wish I didn't have to go back to work. Awesome.
Well, and I think I said Christine the second time. So Kristen, thanks so much. And I should know better because my girlfriend's sister-in-law, his name is Kristen, so I should know.
I could have enunciated a little bit better.
That's all good.
So awesome. Thanks, Kristen, for the question. Anybody else has questions, please share them with us, because Corey is going to deliver some awesome firepower that he's collected and researched on this topic of passion, of why. So, Corey, I loved how you also mentioned that being single-minded when people are starting off, when choosing a niche or a niche, is so critical, because the scattered focus is like, it's an epidemic that people are going through these days, being distracted. How have you, has anything about distractions come up about your why and being focused on your why, living a life full of purpose and passion?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that speaks to my heart. We've already sort of addressed the fact that it's a challenging one for me. I find the ones that are the hardest for us are the ones that we need to focus on more. So this goes back to what I mentioned about, in fact, and I would have forgot to bring this back up, but this whole idea of saying yes to everything and figuring out how to do it later, which I mentioned earlier in the show in my intro. So this idea of the power of no. And in fact, I'm working on my next article for Forbes right now is actually called, Am I Saying No Enough? And so this goes to the root of what we're talking about, Chris. So the challenge I have is focusing on the one thing. There's a great book. I highly recommend it. And I have a lot of books near me because I read a lot. It's called The One Thing. It was on the show recently, and I'm absolutely a fan of their show and the book. So dive into one of the two. But the premise is they talk about you should figure out what the one thing is you should be doing now and focus on the one thing. And the book spends the time teaching you how to do that and making the case for it. But to answer your question, Chris, that was always my struggle. So when I mentioned the music and the comedy, even when I was doing all three of them, adding in the speaking, it was a struggle for me to just focus on one. And the challenge of that was I would have people that hire me, and other people, this was where I woke up, I guess. Other people would say, oh, you brought in Corey. Isn't he a comic? Why is he speaking for us? And I realized, because that's just two different worlds. And I realized, and then so that person getting in the audience is still thinking, weren't you going to make me laugh? And the truth is, if you come to my talk, I add humor in all the time, so you'll get that anyway. But it's not like set on a punch. So they're probably thinking like, isn't this going to be like the Comedy Factory? What's going on here? And so if my brand was confused because I was all over the place. And so it was the hardest thing to do, and I'll give some strategies, but it was the hardest thing to do for me was to actually say, what is the one that's going to get me on track to my why? Now, in fairness, it's like somebody who, and just to go in a weird analogy, but it's like somebody who drank for years, then stopped, and then lectures you. And I mean, it's a bad example because there's variables in, alcoholism, but even when we say cigarettes, I have somebody that smoked for years and then they quit, but they smoked for 20 years and then they jump on the next person a day later. So for me, I don't want to say to somebody, don't chase multiple passions, because the truth is I wouldn't be here today and wouldn't be who I am if I didn't do it myself. So it's a weird analogy or metaphor I'm using to compare it, but I'm saying I don't want to be that person that did it myself and says, but don't you do it. So what I'll say is, for me personally, it was a challenge, but what I had to do, and I did pull the trigger, was basically put the comedy on the back burner stand up, put the music on the back burner, and focus on speaking, and then open up the door for the writing and all those other things. The show, I was doing less shows. I was able to have more by focusing. So the epidemic for me was that when I was doing the music and the comedy and the speaking, how can you give one your all when you're given so much to all three of them? So what would happen was I would barely finish one, let's say, performing stand-up and reflect the performance, and then like within in 20 hours, I'm going to be speaking, and I'm still focused on the stand-up, and I still get the stand-up hat on. And so it was a major struggle.
Yeah.
What I did basically is I it took a long time, but I basically said, what's one that I can incorporate the three? If I want, I can actually take a guitar up and work it into I have a talk coming up soon where they wanted an interactive part, so I'm going to come up and sing a couple of songs where the audience can sing with me, and so I can still do those. Comedy, I can still work it into speaking, but I can't really still go to comedy clubs every week and go perform at clubs every weekend. My last CD was 2 years ago, and I didn't promote it properly because that was when I decided I can't go out and make music videos and all that stuff anymore, because the speaking is the one that's going to deliver on my why in the biggest way. And so I had to figure out a way to incorporate the other two, but then leave them in the dust. Mm-hmm. And will I perform stand-up again? Yeah, absolutely. But it definitely, I don't think it'll ever be as often as it used to be. I performed at Second City Club because that's a huge, famous club. The Improv recently. If I have a great opportunity, I'm not going to turn it down, but I'm not seeking them anymore. So that was a long answer, Chris, but my answer in a nutshell is that it's really, really hard for a person like me to focus on one thing, but I knew I had to do it if I wanted to deliver on what I'm trying to do with my greater why, which when I look at creating an invisible impact or ripple in the world, I can do them with stand-up or music, but not for me at the same level as I can do it delivering in the way of speaking and various platforms that social media now allows, new media, like that. So I made a decision and tried to go focus and all in. And what I will also add is it's also the idea of what you're doing during the day. Mm-hmm. You also have to figure out a way to focus on that too. So whenever you're doing one thing, let's say you're in an interview with Chris, don't also be listening to the Bulls game. Mm-hmm. So there's two answers to your question. One is staying focused on what you're doing at the time, and the other one for me is focused on being single task or focused on a bigger thing that I'm doing overall. Mm-hmm. I had to make a decision to start doing both of those, and it's been painful. It really has, because I want to exhibit myself in all these different ways, but I know every time I do, everything suffers. Mm-hmm. I'm more stuck. I don't get impact as many people in as many positive ways, and so on and so forth. So first, I would say you need to figure out a way to become more focused and maybe make single tasking sexy again. And then at the same time, how you do that, maybe it means that if the distraction is your phone, maybe it means you turn your phone off when you go into a meeting. Maybe it means you port it to the office. Maybe it means you put it on silence. Maybe it means if you want to make sure you're single focused, maybe you have time blocking and you only allow yourself to do this one thing for this hour. And then once that hour's done, then you can do the next thing. So if you're with a person, be with the person and go all in. If you're with your phone, go all in. These are all camps you'll have to break. But what I tell you is, so it's funny, Chris, because you asked a single question that I could have focused an answer on, and I still found a way to multitask the answer. So I hope I answered it overall.
It was perfect, man. I do that same exact thing. I love it. It's awesome. Awesome. So my next question was going to be this specific interview. I wanted to get a little bit at the tail end of responsibility of we are the future, right? So we are the future, and you're talking about making this impact, the ripple effect, empowering people to discover their why. You got some big plans coming out for your book. I'm curious, before the book launches, like officially, and you're doing this Kickstarter, like what have you been doing recently to really amp up your game of being responsible for the people around you and making the difference in the world that you're committed to making?
So I guess what I did and what I've been doing is I've always been accessible, mm-hmm. and that's always been important to me. But at the same time, I like to think I've taken that to another level. So I've been more not reachable, but I've reached out more, and I've tried to be more inclusive and making sure that I'm sharing other people's stuff and not just my own stuff. And and when I say that, I mean, for example, social media or somebody looking for a referral. So a client just emailed me yesterday and said, we need a speaker. You spoke at the conference last year. Do you know somebody else who might be a good fit to build on what you talked about. So rather than saying, no, good luck, it's being inclusive and thinking, who else can I give some business to? So for me, Chris, it's been being a little more active in personalizing my communication with individual people. So it's not just putting out one blast and then moving on. It might be I see somebody saying, I need help with this, and maybe I can't help with that, but I know somebody who can. Maybe it's saying, hey, and tagging somebody in and saying, you guys should connect. Or the email. I had somebody reach out to me to ask me to connect with them with a big influencer, and I reached out to the influencer and said, hey, this person asked me this. Is this okay? I mean, obviously, I'm not going to do it without getting the go-ahead. Right. But instead of just saying, you know what, I'd rather not ask that question, I figured I'm leaving. I mean, that person, the influencer, gets to decide how far they take it after that. Right. I'm just going to, here's the introduction. I'll leave it to you guys to go from there. And I don't think they're going to hold it against me that I reached out and asked them that. So I'm trying to be more active. Does that answer the question? Trying to be more active, personalizing for people and looking for ways that I can continue to be of service to somebody else, especially if I'm expecting people to, say, okay, why should I pick up Corey's book? I mean, I hope the book is way more value than it ever asks. But I think if I'm giving and giving and giving, then at the same time, I'm probably putting the right energy out there to help somebody decide if they want to grab a copy of the book and change their life. Yes. So being of more of service to people, but noticing when there's the times to do that, and not thinking it's a coincidence, actually saying, I'm going to reach out and help this person. And then even to people one-on-one a lot more than I used to. I would say that's how I'm trying to influence this change and positively help other people.
Awesome. That was perfect, dude. That was such a great answer. Thank you for sharing that. So we're wrapping up. Corey, how do people stay connected with you, and what do you want them to do next?
So if, what you've heard about the book speaks to you, the easy way to learn all about the book is go to thebookofwhy.com. It's pretty easy, thebookofwhy, all spelled out.com. It's a Kickstarter campaign, as you mentioned, Chris. It's already going now. People can go there, and on the right-hand side, like Kickstarter campaigns, we've offered a whole bunch of rewards. You'll be blown away by some of the thought leaders that you can get access to if you decide to grab copies of the book, depending on the level, of course, you go to. So that's one thing I would say. And again, not everybody wants to buy a book or it's going to speak to them, but I believe it's a game changer. But if you want to reach out to me and connect with me and just see what I'm doing and see how we can help each other, probably the best way would be to go to CoreyPoirier.com. And so my name spelling is CoreyPoirier.com. Go there, and I believe our social media links are all there. And that would be, the social media is where I'm dynamic. And I say dynamic, I don't mean like dynamic duo guy. I just mean that's where updates are happening all the time. But the hub is usually the website. So go to the website, learn a little bit about me if you want. But even worst case scenario, connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I'm easy to find. Reach out and say hi. And let me know you heard me on Chris's show. And, let's try to make some magic happen together in the long run.
Awesome. Dude, Corey, you're a freaking rock star, man. I'm so grateful to know you, be connected with you, and so grateful. This is time number 2 of you coming on the show. I'm so committed to having you on again after the street team starts going out. Just let me know, man. However I can support you, you're awesome. You have so much wisdom, and just the energy is amazing. I love talking to people with energy, people with passion. You definitely have passion. You definitely are clear on your why. And ladies and gentlemen, go buy this book. You will absolutely love it, because this man is the real deal. Absolutely the real deal. So Corey, thank you so much, man, and we look forward to having you back on again.
Thank you so much, Chris, and I could echo everything you just said, and it's so humbling. Thank you so much, and I'm going to put the invitation out that and I think we've been talking about this, but we got to get you fired up on our show as well. Yes. And bring the fire there too. So let's make some magic happen there as well.
Let's do it, baby.
Awesome.
All right. Corey,
thank you, Chris. Everybody
take care,
else,
brother.